Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO Podcast. My name is Patrick Lyons. I'm here with my friends and colleagues and my fellow consultants, Patsy Freeman and Leb Tannenbaum. Patsy, we'll start with you. How are you today? Good to see your face.
Well, it's been a long time coming having our guests for today, so
yes,
most excited.
True. Actually, we've talked about this one for several months. And actually, to the intro, Leb, I'll hand it off to you since this is your guest, and I'll let you introduce her to our audience.
Okay, everybody listening, I want to introduce Christine Grimm. I'm going to start off because we know each other and we worked on a few projects along the way, that she is one of the most dynamic, intelligent, and heartfelt people I know, period. Not just know in the profession, just one of the most I know. So I am really excited and happy to have you here. She is the founder and principal consultant for ARIA Consulting. She has over 26 years of experience working with executives all over the world, and names we know, companies and names we know. And she focuses a lot on great leadership and well-functioning teams. She's a practice leader in creating sustaining alignment with high trust, with over 400 clients since 1997 with ARIA. She also leads multiple brands, and one of them is AVVI. You say that, Avi, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay, Avi. Avi, you're going to grow. That's all I know about it so far. She leads and offers from her personal purpose, which is to help people live and lead on their destined path. So with great pleasure, welcome, Christine. There's a whole lot more that could be said. And I thought I'd just start off by mentioning that it's on the website. The first time I heard it, it just made sense to me. It hit some nerve, some chord in me, and it's Deep Work Fast. Mm-hmm. So I thought we could start off by you kind of saying, well, where did that come from?
Thank you for the incredible introduction. You make me sound really good, Leb. So I'm going to try and live up to that. Patrick and Patsy, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Deep Work Fast is a great place to start. It's not only the name of my weekly live on LinkedIn and Facebook, but more importantly, I think it was around 2008 that I really started to do this on purpose. Leb mentioned I started in 1997, not really on purpose, to be honest with you. I didn't want to be a consultant. I wasn't really even sure what that was. I was doing a lot of freelancing, and about 2008, decided to do this on purpose. And I was working with a branding person, and they kept saying to me, what is it that you do? What do you want to do? And I ended up asking a few of our customers, what do I do? And a few of them kind of jokingly said, oh God, you make us do like really deep things, like faster than anybody else usually makes you do it. And so the Deep Work Fast was kind of a joke at first. Sometimes I wasn't even sure it was a compliment, to be honest with you. But I did start to realize very quickly that it was true. It's definitely a part of our business, and maybe it'll resonate for all of you and the people who listen. I have a very practical approach, and I don't really like to mess around. I don't like to stay in all the drama and the stories that oftentimes are a part of the beginning of our engagements. People don't usually pay us unless they have problems. And we can get into that if you want, but I do like to get as quickly as possible into the work and help them make sustainable change. So that's Deep Work Fast. I don't think it's grammatically correct, though, by the way. I do have people who always say to me, that should have a comma. Or
So, Chris, I'll just follow it up. When we've done work, and we did some work recently, and we used the Denison Culture Survey, and I think all of us have used Denison before. We understand that culture matters, it impacts performance. Right in the middle of that model, it says beliefs and assumptions. And we're in an ever-changing world. We have an election year going on. We have all these reasons why beliefs can actually help you or keep you stuck.
Mhm.
When I have been in the room with you, I get what you mean by deep work fast, because some of the hard work we do is helping people see, oh, it's not just like an assumption that I have. This is a belief. And it certainly came up after COVID when people were, are we going to work remotely, or can I trust that? And
Mhm.
I need to bring people back into the office. Um, can you talk a little bit about, beliefs and assumptions and deep work fast in this ever changing world that we
Sure.
live in?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the pandemic. I do think that coming out of the COVID experience, I think more people are having maybe two things. One, some of their beliefs that they didn't know they held are showing up more often, like in the things that were, I call it under the waterline before they were hidden or able to be hidden. For some reason, they're not anymore. I think there's a whole bunch of reasons that that is happening. But I do want to, I like the connection you made, Leb, to deep work fast, because that's actually our point, right? Which is why I love the Denison tool, by the way. And I as much as we can use it with clients, we do to do deep work. So everybody, if there's anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about deep work fast, I'm talking about the work being making sustainable change. So whether that's growing or whether it's fixing dysfunction, to me, you always have to go deep into your beliefs and assumptions, create a space where people can quickly share those with each other. So whether we're using a tool or not, I would say we always go there. And like I was saying, post pandemic, I am finding, at least with the C-levels that I work with, I do think there's just a general lack of tolerance now for, hiding things, keeping things, hidden, but also problems that I think businesses and whole industries were avoiding. We're not seemingly avoiding those anymore. I'm glad, but it is painful. It's not an easy process for anyone, but it does require some discipline around, exploring beliefs and assumptions. That can be really touchy-feely. It can also be messy, as I think you all know, if you don't have skilled facilitation and/or a leader who can tolerate some process. So this is near and dear to my heart, and I'm glad you asked, Leb. I wish more models actually brought beliefs and assumptions straight forward the way Denison does.
And what do you see is needed to prepare a group of senior executives or teams to really do this kind of work when it's not probably most of our natural inclination, especially in the work environment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really great question. I'm finding, I can just speak for myself and our team, really. We do a lot of upfront contracting, not just paper contracting, right? But setting expectations early that we are going to address, fairly uncomfortable issues. And just from a structure standpoint, just so everybody's clear, the way we engage with clients, regardless of the ask, frankly, we kind of have a way to engage. We do a lot of discovery. We also contract to, when we work with a team as a unit, we work with the individuals. And I also have a third way, which I call pair work. I believe that the dynamics of a team often live in pairs, right? It's inside their relationships with each other, not just some, big blob of a relationship because they're a group. And of course, I know the three of you know that, but some of your listeners might not think that way. It's often a new way of thinking. Sometimes when I meet with a CEO, because they're used to process that, they have a retreat, they go off site, they have a meeting, a consultant shows up and runs process. And then in between, it isn't always common to have anything other than one-on-one coaching. And so for us to add that third thing, right, the pair, I think is an unlock. And And so, Patsy, that's part of the way I prepare them, is having a conversation that opens up even before we engage a conversation about, where does functionality live? Where does trust live? Where do our beliefs and assumptions live? And they live in three things: individuals, pairs, and the group. And that often sets the stage for us to do process, but also sometimes intervention if needed, or just learning in new ways, because they know we're going to do it in three containers, if you will.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, because foundationally it is about relationships. So if I'm in a pair with you, then that's a different way to explore that relationship.
Christine, in order to get to the deep work fast, and you're right, like grammatically, it's like I want to say quickly, but in order to get to the deep work fast, right? Let's stay with that the lingo. In order to get to the deep work fast, so this is for a listener who, has her or his own team and knows, we've got some deep work we've got to do. What are the characteristics or the dynamics of the room, or the basic tenets of the room that need to be in place so that you can get to the deep work fast?
Well, there's a few things, Patrick. So one, in our ground rules or agreements for process, I establish with the team that we're always working on 4 levels of perception, bringing awareness to each person, which I have to tell you, 20 years ago, I don't even know if we could have done what I'm about to say to you, but now it's incredibly common and it's highly useful, which is, we talk about each person being aware of what's happening in his or her body. Mm-hmm. We talk about nervous system. We talk about feeling stress in your body, feeling emotion in your body, being aware of your personal triggers. We talk about what thoughts that generate, what stories you're telling yourself, what are your beliefs and assumptions there. That is, again, right? The third level of perception is, can I be a witness, right? Like, can I step out of the situation and start to observe it in different ways? Can I think differently? Can I, Leb and I use a lot, I'm sure that you all do, the ladder of inference, and can I step out of this and see my own reinforcing loops? And then, of course, the fourth level of perception is where, real innovation and sometimes flow happens, when we are truly operating in enough detachment that we can really see things and hear things in a way that could be a full reinvention if we needed to, whether that means relationships or our business. So those 4 levels of perception are a critical part of the way we engage. And it does help you move fast, right? When each person is owning that they have all 4 of those levels of perception, and they start to use shared language with each other and start to see, and it is magic. That's what I was saying. 20 years ago, I didn't have very many teams who or we just didn't know, I guess, maybe, but it was unique. Now it's more common for a team to use the language and say, I'm feeling really triggered right now, without a facilitator calling it out in the room, right? So I know that we can do deep work fast if a team starts to play the game, if you will, and are willing all to come into the room. And even if they don't trust each other, can you own your own experience?
Yeah. Do you find Patsy talks a lot about the generational differences in the workplace, right? I don't know if it's still accurate, but at one point there were 6 generations in the workforce, something crazy like that. Do you find that there are different levels of either comfort owning I'm triggered, or different levels of willingness to admit I'm triggered? I think about my kids will be the first ones to say, ooh, okay, that kind of triggered me. Whereas thinking about my parents saying that, that would be a different language. So do you find that there are generational differences in ability and willingness to do that? And does that create conflict? Does that create tension between those, because they're not all saying, it's like, again, I think if my kids said that, I could hear my dad saying, yeah, well, suck it up, rub some dirt on it, and you'll be fine.
Mhm.
Like that kind of thing. Like, so does that make sense?
Yes, I think your dad might be one of my clients.
Yeah, there you go.
For sure. Yeah, I would say yes, not just generationally. Let me just say, I think that it's culturally, because we do work around the world. I think that it has to do with industry, right? We have different abilities and willingness for people to naturally uptake right into this more holistic version of bringing your whole self in. And it is new for a lot of leaders. And, I'm not young, so I've helped develop some of those leaders over the years. So I can't blame them, right? We had a long time where the workplace was devoid of emotional intelligence became programmatic because the workplace was devoid of natural conversations around emotion. So we spend time bringing people into the room. Let me just, for lack of a better way of saying it, I, not just myself, but I train people who work with me to do whatever we need to, so that when we do get into the room, that our leaders, regardless of where they're starting from, know how to participate in an environment. They're not caught off guard by this. I think maybe the first time I engage, they might be, but I have told them a few times. So when we get into the room and we start doing work this way, they go, "Whoa, she wasn't kidding. Like this is how we're going to roll." And then they're, not as surprised anymore, even if they're uncomfortable. And Patrick, my dad, your dad, I think it's for a whole bunch of reasons. Like I said, it could be. And then that helps us move into ground rules, right? It helps us move into operating agreements. Okay, well, if saying you're triggered doesn't feel right, what does feel right? How are you going to tell the people in the room that you're uncomfortable? That's all we need.
For a lot of the people who might be listening, and having all of us at some point been the person that the client had to trust. Let's talk about trust for a minute. Mm-hmm. I'm sure for some leaders, they're uncomfortable, right? They're not sure that they're in a high trust relationship, maybe with their team, or it becomes apparent pretty quickly, so deep work fast, that there's trust issues on the team itself. And you're there doing the deep work. Just anything that might be helpful to these leaders who have to facilitate through change and, maybe recognize how important trust is, but they're not quite sure what to do about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. It's 2024 when we're recording this. The end of 2024 when we're recording this. So no matter when someone's listening or watching, I do think, at least at this moment in time, most leaders, even if they don't buy into concepts like psychological safety or vulnerability versus predictability versus trust, which comes out of Pat Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of the Team as a model originally, or whether they use speed of trust. Most people have some exposure to a model around trust. And so I would say to any leader listening, as a leader, I think it is part of your job to determine what trust needs to look and feel like in your business, on your team, what is your style around trust? And, I often have those conversations with leaders and then start to help them get clear on their own internal narrative and then how that's coming out in their relationships. So I'll give you an example. I've had the privilege of coaching one CEO through multiple companies, and he used to be a professional rugby player. And because he came from sports and he was a really great rugby player, Hall of Famer, I would help him because he didn't have a lot of business language. And his trust language was different than other people's. So I just encouraged him to start to describe to people what trust felt like when he was on the rugby pitch. I think it's called a pitch. I'm not a big rugby player. but I think giving leaders the space to start to define trust their way. So whether they use words like, I know they have my back, or, whatever that is. And Lev, you and I have talked about, giving people scales, right? Describing it or having them make the descriptors and then, rating on a scale. I just think if we can take away concepts like trust and take the touchy-feely out of it, or whatever words some people use that because they feel uncomfortable, we can find the language that they're comfortable with and then help their team align to that so that they're at some point in time, actually speaking the same language. And I do think that that's really important. And I know, Lev, sometimes you and I have had these conversations. And the last thing I'll say about trust is, I think the modern workplace, again, it's 2024. And so when I say modern workplace, we're talking about organizations now where, we've got remote only organizations, we've got hybrid organizations, we've got organizations that have large parts of their population that are back in co-location. But we're also using a lot of technology, and our relationships are very, very different than they used to be. And I think that's an opportunity to redefine trust and open up a conversation where we don't take it for granted and we don't try to just assume old models.
So when I think of deep work fast and experience, and sometimes have experience doing that kind of work with you, Christine, and with Patrick and with Patsy, one of the things that I wonder about is how long it will last.
Mm-hmm.
Will it last when we're not in the room with them? Or will it last when some struggle arises or a change in the marketplace comes up? So any thoughts on the lasting piece of this work that we do? And the reason I started thinking about it was I remember working in an organization for 5 years, and they did keep growing. But one of the things that frustrated everybody was the CEO would read a book and then ask all the leaders to read a book, the same book. And it would stick around for a little while, and then it would fade. And that would lead to another book. And that's not what we're up to. Right? It's sustainable, deep work that can take the crisis or take on COVID and not have everything, fall apart. So thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the deep work fast for me has a lot to do with sustainability.
Okay.
I really like to get at the core of issues. I think it's worth saying that 50% of our business are organizations in distress or some kind of crises. I now believe that having a balance of both customers in a more normal growth pattern or not in crises and organizations that are give us a unique perspective, because we really know what good looks like. And we also really know what it looks like when things are not good, like really bad. And I think that that's relevant, Leb, to what you're saying, because I think there are a key few things that a team can agree to and sustain. You can't often sustain shallow things. You can't work on 50 things at one time, specifically when it's behavioral, right? You've got to choose the few things that everyone's committed to and put them into practice. And, one of the things that we do before we leave, and this is also a part of our contracting, is that I don't like to use contrived exercises. I try to move to real life as quickly as possible. In fact, Lev, a situation that we've been working on together recently, we took that ladder of inference, and that team would tell you right now that For a while, I think they were, every time they saw me, they thought, oh, here she is again with that ladder, and she's going to make us use it. Like I made a worksheet out of it, and they worked in pairs, and they worked issues from the bottom up and the top down. And, we practiced a lot, because to me, if you're going to put practices in practice, you have to practice. Like, I'm not trying to be cute. Like, this is real. Like you have to do the work, and the work means let's pick the few things. Let's do them well together while you have a coach to help you objectively see yourselves, and then I like to not only observe, assessment is a big part of our business. So not just the Dennison, I'm a huge fan of 360, whether you use, I know Dennison has a model, but, having leaders very, very quickly adopt a cadence for giving each other feedback, getting feedback from their direct reports, if not the whole organization. Like, to me, that is a part of that sustainability lab, is the accountability in the whole system for the change. I would say to any frustrated CEO or just anyone who has normal business problems, you don't need to do a lot of things, even if it's a mess, right? We don't start there. There's usually just a few things that can help a group or an organization make a lot of progress really, really quickly. And I do think sometimes, at least if I don't know if you guys all find this, but if a CEO's never had a consultant before, this is their first time having a coach or a consultant, I think sometimes there's a lot of fear that we're going to ask them completely change themselves, or they're going to have to fire their team, or I don't know what. There's a lot of fears. And, I like to just try and calm everybody down in the beginning if we can, and just, get to the practical outcomes we're looking for, and then just do the few important things well.
Christine, you've mentioned a couple of times the ladder of inference. It's a tool that you use. It's a tool that we use. I would say, listener, man, if that's, if you can't get your hands on that, it's a really powerful tool to understand decision-making, the power of beliefs. Talk about the power of beliefs, the role that they play in our thinking and in our behaviors and our habits, and why it's so important to understand what they are, and perhaps even challenge and reshape them. How do they manifest, not only just as as a person, but also as a leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me just say, philosophically, and I think, Leb, you mentioned it in the beginning, I am on this earth to help people be the best they can. That has been since the beginning. It will be until the day I don't breathe any longer. And so a part of that is the examination of mental models. So I just want to say, as you were talking, Patrick, what I hear you saying when I say beliefs, right, is we all have complex worldviews as adults. I think many people get away with, for a very long time, not having an understanding of themselves. And I do think that is what creates and propagates a lot of big problems that we have on a global scale, right? Yeah. I see your eyes, right? Yeah. So I think it's our job, right, to introduce this idea if someone's unaware of it, right? To bring tools. The ladder is one. I have a whole, I'm sure you do too, right? Just a whole collection of tools that are all about, can I help you see yourself? Can we examine what is in your worldview? And we can find the goodness in there. We can also find the things in there that maybe you've outgrown. And I think embedded in everyone, I know for sure, in everyone's mental model if you put it alongside a tool like Maslow's hierarchy or something that also helps you understand your evolutionary path. And I'm not talking about everybody going from being an ape to a human. That's not what we're doing today, everybody. What I am talking about is each person moving forward every day. Are you learning? You know, are you learning on purpose, or are you learning only after a situation kind of forces you to see something that maybe you didn't know before? And, you know, philosophically, like I said, that's just where I am in every situation. And so, I know when we leave the situation, when the leaders are using the language of mental model, when they are using the tools, even if they're not using them all the time or necessarily how the tool was designed, I try not to be a stickler there. I just get really proud of them and excited that the growth mindset has maybe taken hold. And, you know, I come from the world of Peter Senge and Fifth Discipline and learning organizations. And I really, really am a fan of that, even though that's old now. That book is old. The philosophies around it, you know, aren't the most common that you hear today, but I think that's a classic.
Yep.
I'm dating myself.
I'm right there with you. I want to go just outside of business for a minute. So I remember, especially on one large piece of work on the East Coast, where people started coming in and saying, and this is about practice with tools, that they were bringing the tools home. Mm-hmm. And they were bringing them to their families. Mm-hmm. And they got even more excited. And so recently in this work that you were graciously inviting me to share with you, I got to work with both of your children, and they just impressed the heck out of me.
That's really nice.
They're, you know, we work hard. Sometimes we overwork. Sometimes we're really busy. But whether I think of a young worker in business or I think of the impact that these tools and common language can have in a family, obviously something transferred. So
yeah, right? Yes.
Like a younger generation isn't interested in these old tools if they're really good tools.
Yeah, that's true. I did force my family to do the DISC assessment. I just want you all to know. And all four of us were in different quadrants, unplanned.
Fascinating.
What a rich conversation, right? But of course, my kids who are in their 20s now, like Love said, to this day, when they want to make fun of me, they do talk about the day that I pulled out the flip chart in the living room. And
right. So I guess what I want to say to our listeners is, you know, when these types of tools are introduced, it's about life. It's about learning and growing. And if you have multi-generational people in your organization and they're the same age as your children, don't be afraid to share these tools. Mm-hmm. I think every one of us here recognize how much they've helped us. I mean, the latter helps me all the time. I use it all the time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm really surprised. The other thing, maybe it's kind of a wrap in because it's so current, is, you know, the introduction of AI and every business kind of looking at, all right, I think a lot of us, myself, I'll speak for myself, I'm in an assumption. I don't have a strong belief yet. Right. But sometimes leaders in business need to make decisions based on assumptions. Like I look at the data, and, you know, I'd like to be there. I'd like to be at belief, but that's not going to happen. And we need to make a decision. You know, any thoughts about the change curve or the fact that that's true for people and how we can help them, or they can help their teams?
Yeah, for sure. First, you mentioned the change curve. I'm a huge fan. Dr. George Land was a mentor of mine when he was still with us. He wrote the book Grow or Die. It was up for a Pulitzer in 1974. Again, dating myself. You know, but, you know, to your point, Leb, if Dr. Land was still with us, he would make sure that every CEO knew that what's happening to us now was inevitable, right? As soon as technology entered the workplace and continued to just exponentially change every year, whether that meant, you need a new phone or software updates now by the week, sometimes it feels like by the minute, he predicted with that model that we would get to the place where we had to drive for what's called an integrative organization, right? That we couldn't be so normative anymore, which, by the way, everybody, normative is good. It means you can predict and you have a stable organization, right? That's what normative means. But he said that's at a certain point in time, being normative is going to be good and bad. It's going to be the thing that keeps you stable and able to be a public company, for instance, or tell your investors or your board what's happening next and forecast those things. And that same part of you on the other side of the coin will keep you stuck. It will ensure that someone comes along and surprises you, a competitor or customers, or something happens. And then he called it the death spiral. Jim Collins wrote about that in How the Mighty Fall. So the answer, Lev, I say to leaders in every industry, and we've got high-tech customers, but we also have low-tech customers like commercial construction and some grocery and beverage distributors, et cetera, who aren't necessarily cutting-edge tech businesses, who of course are asking questions like, what do we do with AI? And what does it mean to be data-driven? And what are we going to do with a workforce where everybody wants to be involved in technology because they're digital natives and they're used to using that, and then they come into construction, for instance, that is definitely lagging in that. But I would say to every CEO in every industry, to survive in the world to come, agility and speed and flexibility are going to become, if they already aren't, like the most important thing. I think Adam Grant has recently, Dr. Adam Grant from Wharton is saying that on podcasts, which is ability used to be the number one thing.
Yep.
And now that's not the case anymore. So I don't think anybody is excused now from learning how to leverage these new tools.
Yeah. All right. Well, any other questions that we have for Christine? I'm doing a quick time check and making sure that we stay on track. Any other questions for Christine before we turn the page and get practical? So, listener, this is the part of every episode where we try to give you practical things, real things that you can implement starting today, starting tomorrow, to begin making inroads in your business, to be growing as a leader, growing your team, growing your business. And for that, we draw from the conversation we just had, or Christine, you have free reign. If we didn't ask something that you're like, okay, these are the 2 or 3 most important takeaways for a leader, biggest pieces of advice that you have, we'll let you go first. What guidance would you have for a frustrated senior leader that they can, something practical that they can implement almost immediately?
Yeah. So I would say, if you want, can't believe anyone's going to say that they don't, outcomes for your team that are different than the ones that you're getting. You want them to maybe be faster. Maybe you want them to be more accountable. Maybe you want them to collaborate with each other more. All 3 of those things are common wants. So if you want those things, I would say a very practical thing to do is start to understand that old ways of working, highly linear meetings, meetings that don't give enough time to substantive conversation and debate, then that's working against you. So you need to rethink the way your team spends time together and not underestimate, like I was saying earlier, that the answer to getting your team to work better probably is each individual getting better at knowing themselves so that when they come in the room, they feel safe enough to say and do the things that they need to do at the right moment. So we're not delaying things. So we're not hiding things. So they're not afraid to admit what's going on, and that they also clean up their relationships with each other. Like, to me, those are musts.
That's great. Beautiful.
Sounds easy.
Yeah.
Well,
Not necessarily.
I like to say a lot. It's simple but not easy. Right?
That's right.
It's simple, but doing the work is where it's where it becomes more complicated because there are people involved. So,
But you'll see results, right? Like you said, simple but not easy. You will see results. This will happen if the people on your team clean up their relationships in pairs. The team time together will change.
Yep. Agreed. Lab or Patsy, would you like to go?
Go ahead,
You
Lab.
ready? You want me to go? Okay. Well, I'm going to only share a few out of 2 pages. One is, again, simple, but not necessarily always welcomed, is that feedback is a vital piece of sustainable learning and growth. 360s, whatever conversationally, just checking in with people that you work with. Feedback is vital. Work to get to the core. It's again, not the easy work, but it's what makes this work sustainable. And a third is we all use trust language. Find out more about your own.
That's good.
So one I would add is that we all operate from our own set of beliefs and assumptions. And whether we like it or not, some we've inherited, some we've developed ourselves, and they can keep us from achieving our purpose, from achieving what really matters to us. So the more that we can become aware of them and let those go that no longer serve us, then the deeper and faster we'll get towards living our purpose.
Excellent. Any others? There's my turn.
Your turn.
My turn. All right. I got a couple. I'm going to start with something, Christine, you said almost towards the end, that you were talking about being normative is both good and bad, right? So as a leader, be cognizant of when your predictability, which can be good, also makes you stuck and or potentially prone to outside disruption, right? That agility, speed, flexibility are some of the more important qualities in business today. And then I would say, I love this. You said this, and I tried to write it down. Hopefully I got it verbatim, Christine. You said, if you're going to put practices into practice, you got to practice.
Yes.
Right? Pretty clear, but it speaks to, as Lev was talking about, the flavor of the day, the example of having a CEO who's oh, here's a new book, cool, everybody read this is what we're going to do. And then here's another new book, and everybody read this is what we're going to do. And if you're constantly going from practice to practice without putting any of them into practice,
That's right.
that alone can fatigue your team. That will fatigue your team. So, and then this was interesting. And I'd say, listener, go back and listen to this section where Christine was talking about this, but just an interesting perspective that the dynamics of a team aren't just found in the individuals or the collective team, but you can find the dynamics of the team sometimes hidden in the pairs as well. I thought that was interesting. It was an interesting way of looking at it, and something I hadn't thought about. So, and I think as a leader, it's funny, Christine, when you said that, I went to some of the clients that we've worked with and some of the executive team work we've done. And it's interesting because you're right. Sometimes there's some pairing up that happens here and that happens there. And both good and I don't want to say bad, but interesting. Yeah. Challenging. So I thought that was good. We'll circle back around. Anybody want to add anything that wasn't covered that you thought a practical piece of advice for our listener?
I liked the concept of spending the time to bring people into the room.
Mm.
If you're bringing people from diverse backgrounds, whatever they be, spend the time to create the setting so people can actually bring themselves fully, but be successful doing the work that they're there to do.
Yeah, that's
Good.
great.
It is. And I don't think there's enough time spent doing that, Patsy. I think, I don't know what you all are seeing, but
No.
you know, many organizations, they're just rushed. They're just going from meeting to meeting to meeting.
Yeah.
Get them in, get the agenda, get out, go do something.
Right.
Just
Right.
Absolutely. I found one I want to add. Christine, you said as a leader, it's part of your job to figure out what trust looks like in your business, right? What does it look like in your organization?
That's right.
You've got to define it your way, and then you've got to communicate that. So,
I'll add two more.
Okay.
Foundationally, it's all about relationships and trust.
Yes.
It's relationships that create results, not
For sure.
right? Not action items.
Cheers to that, Leb. Yes.
Checked off. So, and then the other is don't assume people understand the ground rules for making deep work fast possible.
That's right.
Be explicit, make it visible, repeatable. You'll forget. The dog cheered.
Excellent.
That was a great time. Okay. And the only other thing I'll say that's tied to that is a lot of people, in terms of visible and explicit and alive, say, well, initial work might say, well, we have core values.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that's not necessarily going to make deep work fast possible.
Right.
And
Sometimes they're in the way.
I was just
Exactly.
gonna say,
yeah,
It's true. Christine, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your insights and wisdom. If someone is interested in learning more about you or Avi or Aria Consulting, where can they find that?
They could find me on LinkedIn. They could find me at ariacx.com. Aria like the hotel in Vegas, and then C as in Chris and X as in X-ray. ariacx.com. I'm also on Forbes. I think you mentioned that. I write for Forbes, and yeah, you could probably just Google me, Christine Grimm, and I'm gonna pop up there, and I dare somebody to come and do deep work fast. There you go.
Excellent. Beautiful. Listener, thank you for sticking with us to the end of another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. Please do connect with all of us on LinkedIn. Subscribe. If you didn't know, we have our YouTube channel where you can watch our episodes. You can see our smiling, shining faces as you listen to the content that we've created together. So like and subscribe to that. And if you're interested in being a guest on a future episode, by all means, reach out. You can contact any of us, Leb, Patsy, or myself at leb@thefrustratedceo.com, Patsy at thefrustratedceo.com, and Patrick at thefrustratedceo.com. Leb, you want to, anything else for the good of the cause? You want to take us out?
just have a great evening. It's we're recording on Halloween.
That's right.
And life isn't scary when you're using common language and common
There you
Nice.
go. Excellent. All right. Thank you. And we'll see you guys next time on the Frustrated CEO podcast.